Exocet update July 24th, 2024. So Exomotive has designed the Exocet to use an NA Miata stock radiator. With any other kind of radiator, the way you mount this is going to differ from what they show on their website. And particularly if you use a bigger radiator, you may not be able to mount it without cutting through the fiberglass hood or having to position it up or down to clear everything. At first glance, it looks like our Mishimoto radiator fits without issue, but upon looking at the intake, there is actually really tight packaging for the upper radiator inlet. This packaging is pretty much what dictates the position of the radiator and nothing else. The Exocet frame by design actually pushes the radiator 3 inches back, so this packaging is extremely tight, particularly against the roll bar. With the mounts that Exomotive provides, you really can't assemble this. Our only solution was to make custom mounts for our radiator, and this is going to be dependent on whatever model of radiator you choose to use. Since the position is dictated by the intake layout, we laid the fiberglass hood on top of the car and then used a borescope to try and see if there'd be any interference where it needs to sit. With the fiberglass hood sitting on the frame, it actually contacts the top of the engine before it touches the radiator cap, but with this position, it's pretty much unavoidable. We're going to have to trim the bottom of the fiberglass hood to fit around the radiator, and the bottom of the radiator will stick out underneath the car slightly. This was probably one of the most tedious parts of this entire build. We checked, double-checked, rechecked before we drilled any holes in the frame and made any permanent modifications to items because we really did not want to screw this up and trash our aluminum radiator or damage the frame in any way. It's also really impractical to mount the supplied radiator mounts in the way that Exomotive shows on their website. The easiest way is to move them down and center them a little bit on the front of the frame so that you can get clearance for a drill and a drill bit. We ended up making mounts that extend the mounting position down on the radiator so that they could tie into the supplied Exomotive mounts that are then riveted to the frame. The extended mounts for our radiator required modifying the radiator in order to attach the extension, which would tie the radiator into the Exomotive mount. Everything could be assembled without issue, and we could disassemble all of these components without having to take the entire car apart or drill any rivets out in the future. Drilling holes in the frame for these mounts was really difficult, and it is pretty much impossible unless you have some kind of low profile drill or you have a 90-degree extension on your drill like what we had from DeWalt. You can pick them up at Home Depot for a good price. I highly recommend it. This steel is really difficult to drill through, so you need to apply a lot of pressure, have a nice drill bit, and that 90-degree extension helps greatly. Once the top of the radiator was secured, attaching the bottom mounts was fairly straightforward, and the most difficult part of this process is the fact that you're drilling holes onto the tube for the frame. If you don't use a center punch and a pilot hole, you can walk off that, damage your powder coat, cause other issues, misalignment. The lower radiator mounts are longer than necessary to accommodate a wide variety of radiators, and you can either trim them or they will likely stick out of the fiberglass hood at the bottom. You will have to trim the hood more than likely. Due to tight packaging on the Exocet, we used a Flying Miata NB Miata lower radiator hose, and we trimmed it shorter to package with our power steering. We used a Mishimoto overflow can. Mounting this was fairly straightforward. The heater core delete is a common spec Miata modification, so you can look up how others do it. We used a Gates 19666 radiator hose. For our radiator fan, we used a Mishimoto low profile fan and created custom mounts for it. This packages well with the tighter packaging on the Exocet.